Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming and for staying. And thank you very much, Brand Innovators, for hosting. I feel very humbled to be a minority in this panel and be accompanied by amazingly successful and exciting women. So thank you. I'm Chalozin. I'm CTO and co-founder of Innovid. I'm not here to talk about myself or about Innovid. We're here to hear from amazing marketers in pretty riveting products and industries that have been changing so much in the last couple of years. So I'm very excited about this discussion. Should we just start with a quick introduction?
Sure.
Puja?
Sure. Hi, I'm Puja Vohra. I head up marketing and strategy at Showtime.
Hi there, Neda, Whitney. I head up marketing for Christie's in the Americas.
Lindsay, Horrigan. I run marketing for Birch, which is a specialty retail brand owned by Wayfair.
Before we start, just a not important fun fact. 15 years ago, we started Innovid, and my absolute first meeting of the company was in this building, and it was very exciting to come here again. Not important, but just sharing. Okay, so let's jump in. Just looking at the pandemic era, clearly it impacted so many different industries, but just as we prepared for this panel, I was amazed that we have representatives from 3 lines of product that were impacted so much by the pandemic, from streaming to the advent of digital art and NFTs, and all the way to home decor that clearly changed so much through the pandemic. So just maybe at the beginning, just what lessons did you take from the last 2 years, and what's sticking with you for the future?
Yeah, you know, I had an interesting journey at Showtime. I joined the week before the shutdown. So I think March 3rd and then March 10th or 12th, we went into the shutdown. So I kind of did my entire job via Zoom. I have this lovely artifact for myself. It's such a weird
Yeah, it's a little weird.
The mic, yeah. Mike, can you all hear me on the mic? Is that okay? I came back to the office we came back, I think, in April this year. And I have this little Post-it note that looked really crumbly and old that just says Zoom ? Which must have been the last thing I was doing before I was leaving for home on that Wednesday. And here we are 3 years later. I think from a streaming perspective, you know, the pandemic was awful on so many different levels. It's almost a privilege to be able to say that at a business level, we were able to forge deeper relationships with our customers and viewers. You know, when you think about various businesses and brands that went up and down, streaming and entertainment and content was something that consumers had that they could hang on to when they couldn't go out, when they couldn't, you know, be traveling. So it really became almost a beneficiary of all of this time and attention. And so we had to work really quickly in terms of making sure there was the pressure of the content not being ready and available because the pandemic led to shutdowns. But we had to pivot really quickly and try and put out our entire libraries, focus on new content, and then really start to pivot with consumer behavior because they were all looking for new things to watch and everybody was rushing in to provide for that. So we actually saw a very different consumer behavior, I would say. And now that the world has thankfully gone back to normal in many, many ways, it's a different challenge where you are now trying to get scattered eyeballs back. And of course, in the pandemic, there was so many more brands that launched as well. So, you know, the competitive landscape exploded from streaming. So it was challenging and interesting all at the same time.
We'll get back to the challenging part, but Neda.
Yeah, I think brands like yours saved me during the pandemic, Puja. I also joined during the pandemic. I started at Christie's in 2021. And if you've ever interviewed during a pandemic or solely virtually. I don't recommend it. But here we are 2 years later. I think for a brand like Christie's, we talk a lot about heritage brands, and I have in my entire career, but I have never worked at a brand that has 255 years of heritage behind it. And it is truly a heritage brand. And it was a brand that was very steeped in its heritage culture, especially when it came to the auction world being very IRL. So this is a culture where you sit in the auction room, you raise the paddle, you go and you stand in front of a $20 million artwork and really take it in before you spend that $20 million on it. And I firmly grasp that concept, not as someone who's ever spent $20 million on art, but as someone who understands what it takes to make that investment. And the firm had to pivot really, really quickly into digital transformation. And unlike a brand like Showtime that might have been part of the way there, we weren't anywhere near a Zoom question mark Post-it note. I think getting to the place where we could take our brand into a digital space with our clients, which our core demographic in aggregate, and again, people think of Christie's and they think of art, but we sell diamonds, we sell dinosaurs, we sell digital NFTs, we sell, books and manuscripts, we sell a whole lot of things, but we also sell a lot of art. And our core demographic is a 65-year-old white man. So that is not what people think of as a core digital first demographic. And it took a lot of hard work to take that digital transformation roadmap that a lot of brands had sitting on a shelf and say, okay, let's accelerate that. We don't have a 5-year plan, we have a 5-week plan. And how do we get all these digital tools in front of a client who may not be interested in adapting as quickly as the brand needs to adapt in order to stay viable. But I think what is really, really exciting, and I talk a lot about this because I think, as someone who spent the first 20 years of my career in the agency landscape, working at digital first agencies for a large part of it, I believe in the power of digital transformation. But even for me, thinking of my client, my 65-year-old user persona getting online, it was a hard logical leap for me to believe it was going to happen. But today, over 85% of our clients bid and buy online. So even to me, that's astonishing. That's a huge acceptance curve to have accomplished in 2 years in a space where you are spending a lot of money on these products. And some people are buying them sight unseen with the digital tools like augmented reality and super zoom and virtual reality and, Matterport to be able to go and see the auction space if you can't come there, and live stream auctions and all the rest of it. So I really do believe there's a space for digital transformation. And when your brands are talking and when your teams are saying, our client won't go there, to that I would say they will. If my client will go there, I'm pretty confident all of your clients will go there. I don't know who your clients are, but I'm pretty sure that they will. And I think the real secret sauce in all of this becomes thinking of that user first mentality and not putting them in a box. I think COVID taught us a lot about the fluidity of the user persona. So while we think in these, this is Frank, and Frank has a house, and Frank has 2.5 kids, and Frank buys, Crest toothpaste, I think COVID taught us that Frank might also swipe on Tinder, and Frank might also, take a car via Uber, and Frank might like to read the New York Times print version, but Frank isn't a monolithic user persona. And how do we take that blend of behaviors that we've adopted in a post-pandemic world and apply them to our brands?
So amazing to hear you speak. Just thinking about the image of Christie is very, very different from what you just described. I'm going to get to it later, just about changing the perception. But this is just amazing. I can't wait to read the case study story about how Christie's shifted during the pandemic. Lindsay?
Yeah. Wayfair, very different from Christie's, was sort of like made for the pandemic, right? It was already on quite a growth trajectory, but then you sort of enter people being homebound, ready to, pull forward all the home projects that has been sitting there at your list forever. So the company really benefited. And I think one of the really cool lessons during that time is that we really, and by the way, I've only been there almost a year. So I split my time between Bloomberg Media, where we also were a lovely recipient of eyeballs and attention. But at Wayfair, it really forced the company to think about long-term investments, because I think there was a realization that COVID probably wouldn't last forever. And so one of the really interesting things to come out of the COVID era for Wayfair is that we're actually investing in physical retail, which, like, if you're crafting that idea late 2020 seems crazy. But if you're sitting here today...
Selling NFTs also sounds crazy at some point.
It doesn't. And particularly for a company that, has benefited from obviously just the digital sophistication and the tools that we have, the shopping experience, to now be starting to go into physical retail, especially when people are out and about, certainly isn't going to be at the levels of pre-COVID, in-store shopping experiences that we had before. But I think it's a really, insightful thing that we got ahead of at the company, to think about how we're going to grow these brands, across a lot of different, channels and shopping, omni-channel shopping experiences that customers have.
I wanted to try and zoom in more into kind of marketing tactics, and specifically touching on points that you mentioned. Puja, you talked about a very competitive market, kind of dubbed the streaming wars, which I'm sure you hate the term, but just what is it like being a marketer in that world? What tactics do you use? Where do you find audience? And I'm sure a very complicated industry to play in.
It is the streaming wars, and often, brands like Showtime, we are not the big superstores, we are not the Walmarts, so we are not the Netflix or the Amazons, and so I think, you kind of show up, and sometimes you can show up, with a knife to a gunfight, but I actually think having a smaller set of marketing resources or smaller teams drives you to be smarter, because for consumers, they aren't making the choice thinking, oh, you're a mid-sized streamer, you're a huge streamer. They're making choices based on, this is what I want to watch. So Yellow Jackets needs to compete with, Only Murders in the Building. We were just talking about that a second ago. So I think the way we had to pivot a lot, we are part traditional, part over the top. So, you can get Showtime through traditional providers like Comcast and Charter, but then you can also buy us direct, or you can buy us via Amazon through third-party ODT. So we just have, I think, a very, kind of research data-driven playbook that we can amplify up or down depending upon the IP. So we start very much with, what is the show? What are the hooks of this show? We work very closely with the creators to understand, because they have often, when they come to us, they've already been working on that IP for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. When the producers of Yellow Jackets came to us, that story had been in their head for a very long time. Same thing for Dexter, same thing for Billions. So we work very closely.
Such an amazing roster.
And there's more. I mean, it is a real privilege to work at a brand like Showtime. So we work very closely with the creators, but the show and the marketing of the show are two different things, and that's often something we have to work on as well. And then, I'm not going to bore you with the details of all of the steps we have in place, starting with creating audience segments, cohorts, early testing with proxy consumers, picking shows that we think are similar to the one that we have to market, thinking very much about what is the potential of the show, how big or small do we think it can be, because resources are limited and you've got to divide up the dollars that you have very strategically. Sometimes our bets work out and sometimes they don't. But we are very thoughtful, I would say, about keeping an eye every day. A show drops, and often that's when the marketing of the show starts. So you do all of this planning, you're ready, you do a little bit of early marketing, you try and build some more top funnel, metrics like awareness, and then the show drops, and then you start to see what's happening. You might have gone into the show premiere thinking this is the kind of audience that's going to respond to it, and you start to see something very, very different. And again, I'll just use Yellow Jackets as an example, which is a fairly recent show for us. It's coming back next year. We went into it thinking one thing, and it did those things, but it did much more than those things, and it kind of set a lot of different audiences on fire. And then we can pivot quickly. We work with incredible partners on the agency side, where we can go in and fuel the flames and say that young female audience is really talking about these characters. Those LGBTQ storylines are really popping for those audiences. Let's put the show and the content and the assets in front of those audiences. So for us, as I said, marketing starts almost at premiere. And sometimes we are able to grow a show 2, 3, 4 times what it was at launch. So we don't, in the earlier days, I was at Bravo for many years. You did everything leading up into launch, and then you could move on because you said, if I get you to dinner, then it's up to the show, whether you like that or not. But not anymore. Now it's about pivoting and optimizing in real time so that you're able to put the show among the audiences where it's resonating.
I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry for going off script. Mostly I don't remember the script, but I'm kidding.
There is no script.
Yeah, thank you. This is what I think as well. Thank you for rolling with us. No, but just based on listening to what you're saying, you've been in the television marketing business for a long time. Was there a change recently in the streaming or the digital era where there was a shift from marketing the show versus marketing the brand? Is there a change in that world?
I'm sure 1,000 people will have 1,000 different opinions. I don't think it's ever changed. I think the brand is always important because to me, it's
the Showtime brand.
Any brand, yes. The Showtime brand is different from, let's say, the Wayfair brand in that we have 30 different. A different show is a completely different product. Yes, it's a television show, or it's a streaming show, but it's very, very different. So I think a brand is always crucial because it establishes certain key parameters that you can depend upon, whether it is quality or provocativeness or the level of talent that is on there, the level of writing, and it's a home. It is. I won't mention the name of the network because CC here will kill me. But I was in LA last week and I saw a big billboard, huge billboard up for a show for a smaller network. And I was like, I've never heard of this show before. Like, who's watching this show and how can they afford this massive billboard on Sunset? For a second, I thought of that as a consumer, and then I was like, no. But for that brand, those audiences are watching those shows because it is home for them. They are going there regularly. That's the first network they put on. For a lot of people, HGTV or Food Network is comfort food. It's there. It's while you're cooking. It's you're working. And so I do think brands are so important because they are your habit, and you cannot afford to not think about it. I will say though, again on the streaming side or on the television side, every show we launch is its own brand, a sub-brand, but it also delivers credibility or not to the master brand. So every show you launch either does the Showtime brand
need to be connected to the whole.
It needs to be connected, but it does either really good work or it takes away from it, right? And so I think brands are crucial.
We spent a lot of time talking about this at Bloomberg, and one of the things we'd think about is is the composite of all of those shows or franchises or sub-brands, whatever you want to call it, telling the right story when you put them all together for that master brand. Because sometimes you need to tell the master brand story and sometimes you need to tell the individual ones. It's actually quite similar at Wayfair. Because if you think about how that brand has progressed, where's growth going to come from? Okay, we've got master brand growth on Wayfair, but how do we actually tell these sub-franchise stories, which could be Birch Lane, traditional home, furniture and decor that's classically styled. That could be all modern furniture, or it could be selling Le Creuset pots that are their own unique brands, or other branded items on Wayfair. And it starts to get really complicated. So it's how does that whole, all of the pieces come together to tell the right story.
Any special marketing tactics that you're using in order that clearly you're building or changing the Birch Lane brand? Any specific tactics you're using on that?
Yes. So I was actually talking about this in one of the roundtables earlier, which is surprising, but because of where we are for Birch Lane, so we're undergoing sort of a complete repositioning in the market, and a rebrand visual identity. I'm actually using print and video to tell that story. And I haven't always been the biggest print proponent.
Physical retail print.
I know, God, right? All that's old is new is again. But I think print is providing one format to tell a bit of a story about Birch Lane when you just can't get that done in so many other digital environments. Because even when you've got long form video content, it's still somewhat compressed. And so, I don't think that's the be all end all, but using both of those has been, I think, pretty impactful, particularly on social and really thinking about the full funnel of experience. So like, what's the highest level message we want to tell about the brand? What's the story? What's the next level down? And then how does that ladder down to maybe like promotional or more transactional or product level information? And so we've been investing a lot in starting to tell the story all the way up the funnel.
I've been waiting to ask NFT questions for a long time. Again, I said it earlier. I'm amazed, just as a viewer. I'm amazed by the polarity of that Christie went through, and it's amazing that you've been at the heart of it. What specific, again, going back to marketing tactics, what specific tools you used in order to do that transformation? I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure internal was very hard, but even just changing the brand perception and really leading a lot of the Web3 revolution under Christie's. What do you use and what do you learn from that?
Yeah, it was an interesting time last year. So I joined the brand, and a few months later, we sold the Beeple work for $69.3 million. And I think it changed the conversation around NFTs and digital artwork. It was everywhere. It was on every news channel. It was, on morning news, so my parents knew about it, and it was very.
They finally knew what you were doing.
Yeah. They were like, you sold a thing we know about, and I was like, cool. 20 years, finally made it. And I think it's had various transformations because marketing at that point. I mean, we were real deep on Clubhouse at the time, and Clubhouse was where you were at for digital art, and I think that has changed. But at the time,
how does that feel so long ago? Right?
I know, it feels so long ago.
Crazy. It took me a second to think about you.
I know, you were like,
real Clubhouse or the yellow Clubhouse?
We were constantly like, are we on mute? What's happening? Can they hear me right now? All from our apartments, scared. But that was the place where everyone was kind of having those conversations. There were a lot of digitally native artists there. There were a lot of conversations about the applications of blockchain technology. When we first got into the space, we partnered with Masterworks, which is a NFT a place where you can buy and sell NFTs, because at the time, up until actually a few months ago, we did not have our own platform where you could buy and sell NFTs. Now we do have a Web3 platform. We're the only auction house that has one. But so we partnered with Maker's Place at the time, and we really looked into who was having the conversations, who was doing great work in the place. And I think love or hate Beeple's artwork, and all artwork is divisive. I think everyone could really respect the dedication he had to every day for 5,000 days, wake up, create a piece of art, and then put it out on social media, which is a notoriously ruthless medium to get critiqued, especially as a creator of things. And he was really getting respect in his community, and the piece sold, and we were off to the races. And I think after that, it became very clear that for digital artists, being a part of the community and a part of the dialogue and a part of the conversation was an imperative to having successful sales. So, I think anyone who's been in the space has learned along the way, and a lot of brands have experimented with NFTs and with the word we all casually throw around as the metaverse, which everyone has a different definition for. But I think we tried selling some Andy Warhol early works that were on Amiga computers, and there were, digital components to them, and they didn't perform quite as well because there wasn't that Venn diagram of digital artists and NFT enthusiasts and traditional artists. So we learned that it really had to be based in the digital art community. And we had team members that were on Discord. We had lots of conversations on Twitter. We had, we were at every NFT NYC. We did the Art Basel NFT circuit. We were at ETH Denver. We were at VCon. We were at, anything that had an NFT trajectory to it, to make sure that we were having a conversation with the true makers. And I think what's really exciting in the space, and it's evolved quite a bit. We did $150 million in NFT sales last year as a firm. I don't think anyone's doing $150 million this year in the auction house space. I mean, OpenSea does, billions of dollars in a couple months, but that's a different transaction methodology. I think now, as a marketer, what really excites me around NFTs is the opportunity for brands to start to leverage that technology on the blockchain to think about loyalty programs, to think about clienteling, to think about how, when we have all these issues with GDPR and data collection or cookies, how you can, as a brand, come out with an NFT and have a one-to-one conversation with your client or your customer and really have a value exchange with them, as long as you have a strategic roadmap and it's not just an NFT that's like, yay, craft or whatever it is. But I think there's a real opportunity there to take the blockchain technology and the transparency behind it and a digital asset that lives within a phone or a cold wallet that you can then have a conversation with a client on. And I think that's the next generation of it that's really exciting.
So maybe I'll stay with you. And kind of the title of the panel is talking about 2023. We talked a lot, clearly, the history of the last 2 years shifted so many things, as we talked about. But just looking at the future, everything you said, how are you changing your storytelling as time changes? I'm sure the idea of NFTs is evolved a lot in the last 2 years. And also, I'm sure, obviously, Christie is a much wider brand than the digital art component. So how are you telling your story different 2023?
Yeah, I think, our NFT consumer trends 20 years younger than our typical demographic. And I think, doing those sales widened the aperture of our brand to a lot of people who weren't familiar with it. But we also sell sneakers, and we sell handbags, and we sell skate decks, and we sell all manner of things that I think are really exciting to the next generation of collector. And so my personal mission and why I got excited about accepting the role was, there is this idea of Christie's as a firm for generational wealth, like the Rockefellers of the world come to Christie's and they sell their estate and the next generation, buys a new estate. But I think for kind of everyone in this room, there's something in our lives that we've collected, whether it was baseball cards or whether it was, rocks or stamps or Beanie Babies or whatever it was. We all collected something and potentially still do. And there's something about that lifestyle that Christie's can still offer. And I'm excited to communicate that because there really is a genuinely amazing story behind one of one. Everything we have in our firm has been owned by someone else and has an amazing story to it. It's not commoditized luxury. There's a lot of, great marketing nuggets there as someone who loves to tell stories. And I think telling those stories on different channels is something that I've really doubled down on as a marketer. So we're on TikTok. We have really expanded our presence on all of our social media channels and the types of stories we tell, both in long form and short form content. And thinking about our channel strategy, yes, we have different types of sales. We're, selling a sale right now that if anyone is in New York for the week or lives in New York, please come by 20 Rockefeller Center. We're selling the Getty collection right now. It's beautiful. It's like maximalist TikTok come to life in our galleries. But it's really, really special and spectacular. And I think telling the story of these people who collected through travel and through, different cultures and through all these different ways, like there's something amazing to that and something amazing to getting a peek behind someone's lifestyle. And so finding the right channels in social media and through podcasts and through, yes, print, and through all the different spaces we do to make sure we're connecting with different generational audiences, that's been really exciting.
Puja, it's kind of amazing how time flies. I was just looking at the clock, and I was shocked that we burned through 30 minutes in like this. Thank you. Puja, I want just same question just about the future. I just feel the world of streaming, work at Innovid, we're a big player in the streaming space. It feels like the world of streaming is starting kind of the second act. There's consumers understand that world. It's not the new sector that needs to describe itself. How are you changing your again storytelling aspects in that kind of, call it, second act of streaming?
I will not answer your question the way you're asking it, but I will say when I look at
I'm not asking the question the way I told you that I will.
No, I said, I think, to me, the thing we need the most, and that is, I think, the biggest challenge, especially given the last couple of years and what that has meant to individuals and how they see fulfillment and what do they want for their lives, I think is just the challenge of good people. Getting good people in the door, keeping them, not just keeping them, but really keeping them in a way that they are engaged and energized. When they see something, they say something, they feel they are owners, not renters, speaking truth to power. All of those things, I think, are the most crucial thing we have, because we can tell different stories. We can do different things from a marketing or a data or a whatever perspective. Small brands can win. All of those things are possible, but I think it's only possible if you have the right people in place. And I think that is just it is the biggest challenge we have as corporates in big cities. I think while hybrid has helped in so many ways, because at least you can still have a life of some sort, but I think it also, just the pandemic in general has made people think so much about what do they want for their lives and what does fulfillment look like, especially for younger people today. Do they want the lives of their parents working the way we have worked? So I think that is, to me, the real challenge of how do I keep people engaged and energized? And it's not just money or a job, because those things are not the most important things sometimes. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not.
And where are you on that journey of
me myself?
Of finding those right people, defining that, and winning them over?
I think it's competitive. For us, it's very competitive because we are, again, we are in streaming where we are smaller than the others in terms of, Netflix will, massive budgets, massive teams and massive budgets. So it's, you have to work harder. And I think the way we try and attempt it, because we have some very good people, is by giving them a lot more skin in the game. So being able to be in, to truly be owning your projects and not just being one person on a totem pole, like way down, like doesn't matter if you're a coordinator or a supervisor or a manager, you should be in the meetings with the talent, if that's what drives your passion and engagement. So I think there are just different things you have to do, different tools when you can't just use money as a hook. But it's tricky.
Yeah. I'm sure, again, having such amazing brands, you said Dexter Billions and others are, it's so amazing to be connected to that and be part of that discussion. Lindsay, I want to shift to you. When we talked, you never mentioned your investment in print, but we talked about how connected TV plays a role currently and how you plan on telling the story going forward. Like, tell us more about that.
Yeah. Sorry to over-index on print. Yeah, when I think about next year, I'm going to get a lot of phone calls from print vendors after this.
Actually, print is a really important channel for us, because I think having something that you touch and hold and feel it adds a level of gravitas and status to something that may not be there in something that's ephemeral.
Totally.
So it is absolutely a crucial part of the media mix, no question.
Yeah. But that being said, we are also going to be expanding quite heavily into just the video format, because I think that's a place to tell the story. And when I think about next year, I think about going back to basics. There's so much uncertainty in the macro environment. There are so many dynamics going on, I think, for people personally. And so when I think about how to meet the customer, it really starts with the basics. So like, what do we really show up and say about who we are as a brand? How do we be really consistent in doing that? Are we doing that in places where that can come across? And also making sure we're being relevant, because there's so many constraints that people are going to be under, whether that's just less disposable income or stresses. And so just making sure we're relevant and topical given that in some of these formats. Like, we want to be aspirational, we're a premium brand, but I think we also have to be just cognizant of what customers are going through and what the environment's like. So that's really top of mind for me going into next year, is just how do we show up as a brand in connected TV, and strike the right balance of doing kind of the basics. So we're looking at, also just thinking about within the media buy space, like, how do we actually really think strategically about where we're spending our money, and be thoughtful about who the platforms or the brands that we're partnering, so that we can show up for the customer in the right place.
I'm learning so much here. Thank you. We have 3 minutes here. Let's do a lightning round. 2023, one thing that will make your life easier to achieve everything we talked about. Clearly, very diverse challenges. But what's the one thing? It could be everything that you need: technology, people, storytelling, something that you're working on or would like to achieve.
People. Puja's right. Like, that's really the crux of, I think, being able to
think about something else.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to double down with Puja over here and Lindsay. I mean, I think people, okay, let me think of something aside from people, though. I think for my brand in particular, a megaphone, and I mean that in the ability to continue to tell the stories more loudly. So Christie struggles from having a wealth of amazing stories to tell, but an inability to resonate with the audiences at the speed at which I want to do them. So maybe patience as a marketer, but
patience feels right for 2023.
Yeah, maybe it's patience, because I think there's a lot that we want to accomplish as a brand, and it's just being able to get it out there as quickly as we want to get it out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. They answered my question. I mean, no, at this point, I guess the only other thing I would say is, we suffer from almost an overwhelming tsunami of data. There's so much that comes in. I think the hardest part is trying to think through what are the important pieces to look for? How do you sift through reams and reams that comes through? So I think some of it comes down to people that can help tell those stories, but I think working with partners to just get better connectivity for data is important.
Totally relate to that. Yeah, totally agree.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.